Hello everybody, welcome back to another Deck Tech video here today. My name is Oren, and of course we're still on the Grixis plan. That's what we're doing. Let's take a look at the list that I've brought you here today. If you've been following some of the recent Magic events, Star City Games had two modern tournaments this past weekend in Indianapolis, in the form of the Open, which was the much bigger one, the 2-day event, and there was the Modern Classic, which was the 1-day event. And in both events, Grixis Delver was able to top 8. In fact, the Grixis colors, there were two Grixis decks in each top 8. So the list that we have here is actually the one that got 8th place in the Open, with just a few minor sideboard changes. But what's different about this list compared to the list we've had in the past? So 20 lands. They've upped the count of lands, I guess, to consistently hit more land drops, and they've swapped the one of the fast lands. So usually most lists would play 2 Spire Bluff Canal. Now it looks like they're playing 2 Darkslick Shores, and the reason they're probably playing Darkslick Shores over Spire Bluff in those amounts is because the deck runs 4 Fatal Push. This might seem aggressive, especially with like 2 Terminate in the deck as well. It's a lot of removal for creature decks, and that can be very dead against, of course, non-creature decks. But the thing is, if you're playing against a non-creature deck, generally Delvers and Mana Leaks and Snapcasters and Bolts usually do a really good job there too. So while you might have some dead cards, we should generally be okay in the sort of linear matchups. Now, of course, if it's the control matchup, gets a little, the fatal pushes get a little worse, but control has been pretty much on the decline lately, which is why a Delver list like this is able to get aggressive while control the game and still being able to present a good clock against combo. So to be honest, I was actually gonna play the Grixis Death Shadow list that Ryan Overturf got 4th place with at the Modern Classic, but I picked up the pieces and I was like, this could be a really cool, fun deck. It's extremely linear, very, very linear, and it might have been a good meta call for that tournament, but the online meta has been very hostile. There's paths everywhere. There's fatal push everywhere. So I'm not a big fan of that list, at least for the online meta. With that said, let's take a look at the sideboard here. The sideboard is pretty interesting. There's a lot of stuff that's always been there. Dispel, 2 Dispel, 1 Countersquall. I believe the list ran 2 Countersquall, 1 Dispel, but personally I think Dispel is the cheaper, more efficient counterspell to have. And in terms of land hate, they split it between 2 Fulminators and 1 Crumble. Let's try that out, see if this Crumble really is better than the 3rd Fulminator Mage. No Ancestral Vision. They're going for 2 Painful Truths. And I played a few games against Jund. Painful Truth is fantastic, and I'm sure Ancestral Vision would have been nice too. But I drew Painful Truth, much later than turn 4 or 5, and I didn't have to wait 3 turns to get my 3 cards. I already had like 6 lands in play, so I could even play some of the cards that I drew. So I really enjoy Painful Truths in a build like this. Collective Brutality has been great in attacking both burn and combo decks. 1 copy of Surgical because graveyard decks aren't as big. But it's still nice to have, nice sort of answer, even to pick out the combo against Abzan Company. And on that same respect, we are playing 1 Anger of the Gods versus the 2nd Engineer Explosives, because I think this exile effect is very helpful. Now, even though Engineer Explosives can hit things like Death Shadow, which could be on the rise, I think having this sort of sweeper exile effect is really helpful in a lot of different matchups. And then, of course, Vandal Blast can deal with a lot of things, Lantern Control, Affinity, I guess even, I think you probably bring it in against Tron. It's a 1 mana removal spell. It can hit, Expedition Map on, like, turn 1 when you're on the draw. So that's one thing to note about it. And then, of course, is it Staticaster? Never leave the house without it. Lingering Souls is a serious problem for decks like these, so having an answer is really important. Alright, but that's the setup. As usual, we're going to run it through a Modern Competitive League. I tried to keep the deck tech short and sweet here because, Grixis Delver hasn't had too much of an evolution, but it's more of like this streamlined list that you see here. A lot of multiples, a few one-ofs that do a very specific task, and then I think this is a pretty tuned sideboard for the meta here. So yeah, stay tuned. We're gonna run it through a modern competitive league, and hopefully we will give the other decks a run for their money with Grixis Delver. See you soon.